Hello and welcome to Web Hack Wednesday. I'm Martin Bibby.
And I'm Martin Kerm.
And today we're going to be talking about WebP.
WebP?
WebP.
Okay, what's WebP?
Well, WebP is a...
Is it a new JavaScript framework?
No.
No.
It could be. It's an image format.
Okay.
And it's... The reason this came about was because on our internal alias, someone was asking, how did YouTube do some video thumbnail previews?
Okay, right.
And they were saying, it looks like they're using GIFs.
Yeah.
And then they'd looked into that and they weren't using GIFs at all, animated GIFs. They were using some kind of thing which was WebP.
Right, okay.
And to be honest, I'd never heard of WebP before and hadn't really looked into it. Although it turns out WebP's been around for a long time.
Okay.
And it's just this new image format.
Right.
And it's, if you imagine, it's a kind of image format which is predominantly, have you ever heard of is it VPA, the Google video format?
No.
Well, it's the same sort of technology they use in compression there, but they're using it in images.
Okay.
So it promises to deliver really high quality images, but much smaller file sizes.
Okay.
And so you can use it in replacement for PNGs because it has an alpha channel.
Okay.
But you should get smaller file sizes.
Alpha channel meaning it can be transparent.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So you can have an alpha channel in there, but it does it, and also it can be used as a replacement for GIFs as well. And what it'll do is you can string together some images, and when it compiles it into a WebP image, it does some special voodoo that involves a regular GIF is just a selection of like bitmaps effectively. So the position of a pixel, the color of that pixel, just in a big long row.
Yeah.
Whereas I believe WebP is doing some more intelligent stuff around if there's not that much difference between the next color and so forth. So it basically ends up with a smaller file size.
Okay, cool.
So you can have the same sort of size GIFs or the same view. It looks like a GIF, an animated GIF, but it's actually a WebP image, and it means that it's going to be much smaller in size.
So good for performance then, basically.
Well, it is, yeah, and I guess that's the reason why people would potentially use it. And it's been used by Facebook and YouTube.
Okay.
And it generally tends to be those sorts of companies which have huge scale where this kind of performance gain would be beneficial.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
But I just thought it was interesting to have a look at
yeah,
and what it could do and just to kind of show you some about it. So the first thing to look at whenever I'm using anything is I just check on can I use and just see, well, what's support like for this thing?
Not looking that good, actually.
Well, you say that, but you know we live in a world where Chrome is a huge...
Chrome's fine, so that's,
Well, you've got it on Chrome and Android browser, which are the two major browsers. The big one which is missing here is it's not on Safari iOS. So you're going to be able to use this image, but only for those kinds of.
So if you do this, you get to see that actually it's on the main place where people are.
Yeah, so it's relatively well supported. Yeah. So if you were to implement WebP, I guess, and your objective was to reduce file size and the amount of bandwidth you're transmitting, then this probably would work, right? Because there's a lot of viewers on major sites which are using those two browsers and they support it. So, but it is going to be important that you have sensible fallbacks because it's not supported everywhere. Yeah. And fallbacks for WebP, of course, can be PNG images. Yeah. PNGs. GIFs if you want to animate. And if you were to look at it and say, well, we'll serve WebP images to some people which have got the capability of that, and we'll serve GIFs to the others, then you will be saving bandwidth effectively. And depending on the scale of your site, that might or might not be important.
So where's this set alongside something like SVG?
Well, it's not like SVG.
Is it like a photo? It's sort of images that SVGs wouldn't be suitable for.
This is it's basically if you're trying to deal with a bitmap or an image or photograph or something like that.
Not so much
it's a really high compression for those things. It's a really clever compression technology for those sorts of things.
So it'd be great for like product photos, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so it could be for those sorts of things. Generally speaking, though, where it's being used most is video thumbnail previews, and that's where this original question came from. I was like, well, I've seen it on YouTube, or I'm using it. So how do they do it? And there's also a thing in the specification about in WebP about it can do something which GIFs can't do, which is it can stop at a specific frame in an animation and then carry on. Now, when I first came to WebP, I was like, oh, that's really cool. We can control that through JavaScript. But that's not the case. Right. The actual specification means that the browser manufacturer can stop it at a specific frame. So actually, it's about performance when you're switching tabs. So
Right.
you know when you switch a tab, the browser could choose to pause the animation, and then when you go back to the tab, it could carry on the animation. So I was thinking, that would be a really cool thing, like to sort of pause the animation and then restart it. And that was the original question was, which I go back to, was how do I do it? And is there a way to do pause play sort of in JavaScript of WebP Images? Well, it turns out that no, there's not.
Right.
And the way that you control, the way that YouTube control it, because basically as you hover your mouse over the image, it starts playing, and then when you hover out, it stops playing.
Yeah.
So how do you think they achieve that?
VD, it's got to be.
No, it's just using an image rollover like you would do with
okay.
anything.
Simple as that.
Yeah, it is. So I was investigating this and I thought I'd build something to just show how you would do it. And there's a few interesting bits and pieces along the way. So this is a page on my website.
Okay.
Ignore all the stuff. Just the only two things that are really important here is going to be adding a script tag.
Okay.
And adding a script tag and adding some HTML. So I'm going to use Modernizer. Modernizer, we've talked about this loads years ago, actually.
Yeah.
But the idea is that it's a library which can help you detect if a feature is available or not. It turns out that WebP is actually quite a tricky thing to test.
Okay.
In the Modernizer's got a few different APIs. And usually a Modernizer test is sometimes just looking if something is on the window object or something like that. But this, to actually find out if there's an animated WebP support, they actually have to create like a canvas, print the image to the canvas, figure out if it worked or not, see if there's a few frames. So it's an asynchronous test in Modernizer, which is something which I was again unfamiliar with. I've not really used an asynchronous Modernizer test before.
So meaning it will run in the background effectively whilst the rest of the page is loading. And,
so it's something you have to add a listener to. It's not something you can just make a request to immediately and get the response, because it actually has to go and do some stuff before it can figure out. So I've just added this as an ASP.NET Core application. I've added it through Bower, I've added Modernizer, and then I've added the script tag for Modernizer to my application. So I've got Modernizer in there. So I'm going to just paste in the Modernizer thing.
Okay.
And this is how you do an asynchronous Modernizer check. So we said on WebP, and then we have a callback function, which is just function with a result. And if that result is true, then that means that WebP is supported, and else it's not supported, right?
Okay. So makes sense.
Like that. So we're in here. It's supported, and I've got to have somewhere that I then go and put my actual image on my site. So I'm going to just have here. I'm going to put a P tag, which I always do for in these demos. I'm just going to give that an ID of information. Okay. And I'm going to put an image tag in there as well. And I'll give this a source.
So it is just bound to a standard image tag then. There's no like.
Actually, I did try and do the same demo with a picture element. Have you seen the picture element before? Yeah. And a picture element is it's just like an image, I guess, but it's got multiple sources. Yeah. And then I was trying to do this rollover with JavaScript. I didn't get it working because I found it was specifically in Chrome that when I was dealing with it in JavaScript, it was not behaving in the way that I expect it to. Okay. And obviously you have multiple sources, and some of them are WebP and some of them are not WebP, and I want to switch some without it became very complicated. Quite work. Okay. Yeah, so for this 10-minute demo, I thought I'll just show it with images.
Just keep it standard,
Watch this space. I will probably figure out how to get it working with picture, but I couldn't at the time. Picture's actually a really, I'd say, a pretty. That's one of its problems is dealing with it, like switching out the sources. Yeah. Doesn't really have a very good JavaScript API that I can figure out anyway. So we've got the image tag, we've got a source element to it, so I can just close off that image tag. And I've got a thing in my CDN, which is the Beebs Azure edge.net.
That's a new one. I've not heard of that before. Azure Edge.
That's if you create a any kind of CDN. Well, I basically have a storage thing in Azure, and then blob storage, it's got all my images in it, and then I just put a standard CDN on the top of that, and then you get a URL, which is, customize the Beebs.Azure Edge. You can actually add custom domains to that as well, but
that's cool. I'm not seen that before.
I don't bother doing that.
Anyway,
so that's just Wayne.
I can't wait to see what this image is, by the way.
And so I've just got an image tag. Yeah. It's got a JPEG in there as well. And what I want to do is I want to find any image which has got or wants to participate in this rollover sort of thing. So to do that, I'm just going to decorate this with a data attribute.
Okay.
Data, and I'll call it mouse over equals. And what I'll do is I'll supply the image that I want. Actually, I'm just going to change that to HTTPS because my actual site's HTTPS, so I don't want cross origin. I don't want a security error. And then HTTPS / the Beebs dot.
You got the NG bit in? Or?
I don't. That was Visual Studio trying to be helpful. I'm not using Angular at the moment. The Beebs dot Azure edge.net / Wayne, and then this has got this other extension which is WebP.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I want to do in JavaScript is pick this image up when someone's mousing over it and switch those two things out. And what should happen then, you'll get the effect of it going from a standard JPEG to an animated WebP image.
Somebody called Wayne.
And you know who that is.
Well, I think
there's only one Wayne in my world.
Well, we'll wait and see.
So if supported, then we're going to go and add some code in here now to look for all of those different elements. So I'm just going to say document.querySelector, and I'm going to look for anything with an attribute of data.mouseover.src.
Okay.
So this is all of the images with one of those on it.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to just loop through those. So I'll just do a for loop over that all items dot length.
Okay.
And inside that for loop, I'm going to add a little bit of JavaScript.
Okay.
Now, this is just creating a function, and I'm appending this function to the listening events of that image, or all of the images that which are in that collection, with a mouse over and a mouse out. So what will happen is it's going to take the current source of that image, and it's going to save that in a variable. The target source of the image, which I'm going to scoop out of the data mouse over source attribute. And then I'm going to set the source element to the target. So basically I'm switching the image. And then I'm going to set the attribute to the current source or the old source.
Yep.
So it's going to switch the JPEG for the WebP. And then when I mouse out, this data attribute will contain the old image. So I can switch them back, and it's like basically toggling those two elements back and forth. And then I've attached it both to the mouse over and the mouse out event of that image. So what I should be able to do now is if I've done everything I need to. Oh, one other thing was when it's not supported, I'll probably want to just put in a document.
So presumably this will, because you set an image, because you set the source tag on the image, it would just fall back to that anyway, wouldn't it?
Well, I've only basically given an image of, I've only given an image, a JPEG image.
Yeah.
And I've given the thing a JPEG image as like the default image.
Yeah.
And then this is just a data attribute, which will only ever come into play if WebP supported, because in the JavaScript it will only ever add it if it's a supported thing, right? So get element by ID. Sorry, I can't actually seem to talk at the moment and do actual code at the moment. Information. What am I doing again? Oh yeah. Inner text equals, and where you can say your browser doesn't support WebP.
Okay.
So that's only ever going to be executed if the modernizer test fails.
Got it.
I think that's it.
Okay, let's have a look. I want to see Wayne. I want to see animated Wayne.
So let's go to that localhost. Oh, it should be loading up. And then I think it was.
So you're using Edge here.
I am, which doesn't support
WebP, right?
WebP, yeah. Okay.
That's Wayne.
So I've got that little thing that says your browser doesn't support WebP.
It is the Wayne I thought it was going to be. I'm quite pleased about that.
And if I scroll over it, nothing happens.
Yeah.
And then if I go into Chrome, you'll see as I roll over it, it switches out for the web
technical
image.
Yeah.
Now,
That's very cool.
it is, but it kind of got to the point where, okay, well, I've got these WebP images. That's great. How to make one?
Yeah.
That sadly isn't as easy as you might imagine.
This is the problem I always have with SVGs.
Yeah, it's like the workflow.
It's great, but then when you come to actually make one, it's like I know there are tools and stuff, but it's difficult.
I use for SVGs actually. I use this thing called Affinity Designer.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Right.
Really is genuinely brilliant, and it's really good on Windows and on Mac. So what you end up having to do is do stuff like this.
Right. This
is not like great.
No.
This is not the experience that you really want to be doing when you're doing your designing.
Creating an image in the command line is not. Instantly fills me with a little bit of dread.
Yeah. So just to show you, and I've included this file. You can download it from Google, but it's in the Webpack Wednesday GitHub repo as well. Yeah. It's basically a library, and a library which allows you to do lots of different things with WebP. And if you were actually producing, if you were the people behind Fireworks or Photoshop or Affinity, then you would use this to maybe implement the image format, I guess. And inside the bin, you have these executables. Right. Well, one of these executables is relatively easy to work with, so we'll work with a bit with that. So if I'm in this current thing at the moment, I just put is it ls and no list dir. I can't remember what it is in Windows. There we go. Dir. We have a GIF in there called Wayne, and that's how we start with that. So we've got this GIF in there, and what I'm going to do is go into this and just use this thing first. And the default parameters, which I need for GIF to WebP executable, are Wayne.gif, and then -o, which is output, and then the WebP. Okay. So if I do that, I've now got a WebP file, which is so if I did start now, you see now I've got a WebP, which is Chrome is my.
So what happens if you just open that on its own?
Well, Chrome will open it like an image.
Right, cool.
There is actually also an add-in you can get for Windows Media Viewer or Picture Viewer to be able to view these things. And Google have written that. Okay. But nothing but Chrome will really understand that. So. But you'll note that the size of it isn't that much different. If I just look underneath here, you can see Wayne.webp
it's not a lot in it. It's slightly smaller.
However, if we were to execute it with slightly different parameter, which says min size.
So I wondered why you'd erased the min size parameter before.
Yeah,
because now it all makes sense.
Yeah. And I do that. I get that, which is actually the same. Okay. Because what I wanted to do was actually not that parameter at all. It was lossy. This is why I really love. Command line. All the time. You can see now that's actually quite a significant reduction. That's 40,000 bytes roughly.
Compared to 223.
But your image, which you're actually outputting.
So let's open the new smaller one in Chrome and
so
see if we can
40 KB.
detect any difference. No, I mean that looks exactly the same to me.
Exactly the same, yeah.
And I am normally it says the untrained eye, but I'm a trained eye.
You've got trained eyes for this.
I've got trained eyes. I know exactly what I'm looking at, and that image right there.
Yeah.
Looks
so
exactly
I'd say, like, to sort of round this off, WebP is an image format which can have significant savings of animated GIFs. And if you're in the business of serving animated GIFs at scale, then WebP is the image format for you. And you don't care about iOS particularly, or you're willing to do a fallback.
Yeah, but I can see scenarios like I've noticed a trend recently in e-commerce about a lot of e-commerce websites will add some kind of animation to their product images. Like I've done some work recently with JD Sports. I noticed that when you look at any of their items, like if you go and look at a pair of trainers, it will spin round and then show you a static image.
Yeah.
So. And I think they're doing that with JavaScript and stuff, but this could be a really good way to do that. Kind of just add a bit of shizzle.
Shizzle, yeah,
add some shizzle to your images.
So I showed you it in command line. The cool thing, if you think about the way that people are constructing websites nowadays, this could easily be as a gulp or a plugin, for example, as well. Yeah. And they're already built. You don't have to write your own. So there's an interface for this. So if you just basically built everything in GIFs, and then converted it,
very good.
You're not using one of the features, which is the alpha channel. potentially
No, but
in this, but that's kind of by the by.
Yeah, it's cool. Very good.
Yeah, it's good. But I would say, the only real people which should probably be using WebP are people which have really big sites where this sort of bandwidth, where they're paying for their bandwidth.
Or if you want to add a bit of shizzle to your images.
Yeah, but then probably you just use GIFs. Like you're not getting any benefit from it. It doesn't look.
But I suppose
better.
there must be a performance. There's obvious performance benefit though. If you're
there are,
making the images like 10%
is
of the size of
precisely. So if you're JD Sports and you've got on a page 50 images, then but actually in the browser subsystem, it's actually a little bit more expensive to show a WebP image than it is to do a GIF image because they have to do the decompression, I guess. Yeah. Whereas a GIF, they can just read in the byte streams. Yeah. So, like performance, I wouldn't necessarily say it's definitely higher performance in browser. Yeah. It's performance in terms of bandwidth and potential latency. Yeah. But I'm no performance expert.
Browsers have to do a bit more work.
You'd have to weigh that all up. But I think that it would, in conclusion, only really be useful if you've got a large e-commerce website or a large video site where you need to do these sorts of thumbnail previews continuously, and bandwidth is a constraint for your business. Like you're serving to millions of customers. I wouldn't personally be using this in a scenario on a blog where I just want to show a GIF. I'd show a GIF or a video. Yeah, makes more sense. Yeah. Okay.
Very good.
Well, that's it for this week's Web Hack Wednesday. Thank you very much. See you again next week.